Flight 441 from Dubai to Istanbul was supposed to be an ordinary 7-hour journey. Passengers lined up at the boarding gate with excitement, exhaustion, or simply the calm routine of travel. Among the hundreds of travelers was 12-year-old Aisha Malik, a quiet, observant girl with bright eyes and confidence beyond her age. She clutched her small backpack, the one she always traveled with, and kept checking the boarding pass tucked inside her pocket. It was her first time flying alone. She was traveling to Istanbul to visit her aunt for winter break. Her parents had hugged her tightly at the airport, her mother giving the usual long list of instructions, her father reminding her to stay strong and responsible. Aisha loved flying, and unlike most kids her age, she found airplanes fascinating rather than scary. Flight 441 was a full Airbus A350, carrying 418 passengers, families with kids, couples, students, tourists, business travelers, and crew members who had worked this route dozens of times. The plane was massive, stable, and trusted. Nobody expected anything unusual to happen. Aisha took her window seat at row 18, right above the left wing. She smiled as she watched the pushback begin, the engines roaring softly. Flying always felt magical to her, but the real reason she loved it wasn't magic. It was knowledge. Her older brother, a passionate aviation enthusiast, had introduced her to flight simulators at the age of 7. Over the years, she had spent countless hours learning cockpit controls, emergency procedures, landing techniques, and even how to troubleshoot failures. She wasn't a pilot, but she understood planes far more than an average adult passenger, maybe even some trainees. The plane climbed steadily after takeoff, the city lights fading into a sea of darkness. Passengers settled in, some watching movies, some sleeping. Aisha plugged in her headphones and watched. The altitude indicator on the screen in front of her eyes. Everything felt calm, smooth, perfect, until it didn't. 2 hours into the flight, when the cabin lights were dim and most people were relaxed, a sudden metallic thud shook the aircraft. Aisha's eyes shot open. She removed her headphones immediately. A second later, the plane tilted sharply to the right. The overhead bins rattled. A few passengers screamed. Then came the sound nobody wanted to hear. Beep, beep, beep. A piercing alarm echoed from the cockpit, faint but clear through the thin door. Before anyone could understand what happened, the aircraft dipped downward. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Drinks spilled. Babies cried. Flight attendants struggled to stand as turbulence slammed. The plane up and down like a powerless toy. Aisha grabbed her armrest, heart pounding. But she wasn't panicking. She was analyzing. That wasn't normal turbulence, she thought. Something failed. Inside the cockpit, chaos was unfolding. Captain Rami, a senior pilot with 22 years of experience, suddenly collapsed. Minutes earlier, he had complained of chest pain, but before the co-pilot could react, the captain lost consciousness completely. Co-pilot Jonas, only 9 months into his role, was alone and terrified, but trying his best. When the first engine shutdown warning appeared, he initiated emergency procedures. But the aircraft's systems began failing one after another. Rudder issues, hydraulic pressure warnings, and a dangerously overheating second engine. The intercom crackled. The co-pilot's shaky voice came through. "Ladies and gentlemen, hey, please remain seated. We are experiencing technical issues. The crew is working to regain control." His voice broke on the word control. Passengers knew something was terribly wrong. Aisha took a deep breath. She noticed people around her crying, praying, holding their masks tightly, but her eyes remained fixed on the cockpit door at the front. The alarms I heard, engine failure, hydraulic loss. He's alone in there, she thought. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle toward the front, pale and trembling. Aisha stood up. "Ma'am," she called out. The attendant turned, startled. Aisha stepped closer. "Is the pilot okay? Do you need help?" The attendant blinked at her, confused. "Sweetheart, return to your seat. It's an emergency." Just then, the plane dropped violently, making people scream. The attendant stumbled and grabbed a seat for balance. Aisha steadied herself. "Please listen. The alarms you're hearing, those are critical. Is the captain unconscious?" The attendant froze. How do you... Aisha continued without hesitation. Is the co-pilot alone? He can't handle a hydraulic and engine failure together without assistance. The attendant swallowed hard. Her silence was answer enough. Aisha spoke softly but confidently. I can help. I know the airplane systems. I've been trained on simulators for years. The attendant stared at her, this little girl with calm, steady eyes, while everyone else was panicking. The plane lurched again, left wing dipping dangerously. More screams. A child cried loudly behind them. The attendant closed her eyes for a second. Desperation won over hesitation. Come with me, she whispered. Aisha followed her up the aisle, gripping the seats as the aircraft shuddered. People looked at her in confusion. Why was a child walking toward the cockpit in the middle of a crisis? At the door, the attendant knocked twice. "Jonas," she shouted, "I'm coming in!" The door unlocked. It opened slightly. The cockpit smelled of burning metal and panic. Warning lights flashed everywhere. The co-pilot was drenched in sweat, hands trembling on the controls. "What are you doing?" he yelled when he saw a child enter. "Get her out!" "She knows the systems," the attendant said breathlessly. "She what?" Before he could continue, the plane jerked downward again. Jonas grabbed the yoke with both hands to pull it up. "A hydraulic's failing," he shouted. Aisha stepped closer. "Switch to manual override. If you delay, the plane won't respond anymore." Jonas turned toward her, stunned. "How do you know that?" Aisha didn't waste time. "Because your primary control system is failing. Look at the display. Pressure is in the red zone." Jonas looked. She was right. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, but a fraction was all he had. He reached over and flipped the manual override. The aircraft steadied slightly, the alarms reduced. Jonas stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Who are you?" Aisha took the jump seat behind him. "Someone who wants to help you save 418 lives. And just like that, everything changed. But somehow, she wasn't scared. She wasn't crying. She wasn't confused. Aisha looked exactly like someone who belonged there. "Tell me everything," she said calmly. Aisha inhaled sharply. One attempt, no second chance, no go-around, no time to circle again. Altitude dropping fast. Wind conditions are hostile. You have one landing attempt, repeat. Aisha analyzed the screens rapidly. She pointed at the flickering fuel gauge. Fuel imbalance. That's making us tilt left. Transfer fuel to the right tank or we'll enter a roll. Jonas stared at her, shocked that she saw it instantly. But he followed her instruction without question. Nervously. As the fuel valves redirected, the plane slowly leveled, and the aircraft is not responding well. Reduced autopilot disconnected. Not enough, but enough Captain to breathe. Is unconscious. Outside, we're running out of time. Was pitch black. Thick clouds surrounded them like walls of darkness. They were flying blind. Aisha leaned forward, looking at the navigation display. We're too high for an emergency glide, but too low to regain altitude with one engine. We need a controlled descent and land at the nearest strip. Jonas nodded. Air traffic control gave us a diversion point, but with this wind, a sudden alarm cut him off. Stall warning. Stall warning. The plane dipped nose down again. Jonas gritted his teeth, pulling up with all his strength. "It won't respond," he shouted. Aisha spoke quickly. "Don't pull too hard. Nose down a little, or we'll lose airflow completely. We need speed, not height." Jonas eased the yoke forward. The plane steadied. The stall warning stopped. He looked back at Aisha like she was a miracle in human form. "Who taught you all this?" he asked breathlessly. "My brother. He uses professional simulators. I spend hours learning with him. He says knowledge can save lives." Jonas couldn't argue with that. The proof was already in front of him. Immediate. Meanwhile, in the cabin, passengers screamed with every drop. Babies wailed. Couples held each other tightly. Many thought these were their last moments. The flight attendants tried calming everyone, but the fear was overwhelming. Some passengers noticed the cockpit door open earlier and whispered, "Did a child go in there? Is she helping the pilots? God, I hope she can..." People prayed, cried, and waited for any sign of hope. Immediate. Back in the cockpit, the final chance. Jonas patched through to ATC again. "Mayday, Mayday, Flight 441 declaring full emergency, attempting to land with one engine. Request immediate vectors." Static, then a voice finally responded. We see your... She checked the systems again. We're losing altitude faster than expected. The second engine is about to shut down. As if responding to her words, a loud warning blared. Engine 2, fire detected. Jonas' eyes widened. No, no, no. He activated the fire suppression system. Lights flickered. The fire warning stopped. But then the engine display turned black. Engine 2 offline, Jonas whispered. Aisha closed her eyes for half a second, gathering courage. We can still land, she said. Jonas blinked. Without engines, you understand what you're saying, right? We glide, like we practiced. Keep the nose steady. Maintain the glide slope. Use gravity. Jonas nodded slowly. You lead, he said. What? You see things faster than I do. You're thinking clearly. Just tell me what to do. Aisha felt fear for the first time, but only for a moment. Then she sat up straight. Okay, let's save them. The descent. The plane was now a giant glider, silently slicing through the night sky. Without engines, every move had to be perfect. Aisha watched the altimeter carefully. Bring the nose slightly down. We need speed. Don't let it drop below 210 knots. Got it, Jonas replied. Wind slammed the aircraft from the left. Correct with rudder, Aisha instructed. Jonas followed quickly. The runway appeared far below, glowing faintly through the storm clouds. Aisha calculated fast. We're coming in too high. Extend flaps, step 1. Jonas lowered the flaps. Not too much, she warned. We don't have engine thrust to recover if we lose lift. The plane obeyed. It steadied beautifully. Passengers started seeing city lights. Hope spread through the cabin like fire. People whispered prayers. Mothers hugged children. Elders cried silently. The landing attempt. Aisha monitored descent rate. We need more drag, landing gear down. Jonas deployed it. A jolt ran through the plane. Altitude, 900 feet. Speed, 195 knots. Runway aligned. Aisha breathed deeply. This is it. Keep her steady. Don't flare too early. The aircraft sank lower, lower. 100 feet. 70 feet. 50 feet. Hold, Aisha whispered. Jonas's hands tightened. Now flare gently. He pulled the yoke back slightly. The plane touched down. Thump! Sparks flew as the aircraft slid violently across the runway. Jonas held the yoke. Aisha grabbed the seat. The plane screeched for what felt like forever. Then, slowing, stopping, stopped. Silence filled the world. The aftermath. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. No one breathed. Then a single scream came from the cabin. We're alive! Cheers erupted. People cried, hugged, shouted prayers of thanks. Flight attendants sobbed with relief. Aisha finally exhaled, her hands trembling. Jonas turned to her with tears in his eyes. Saved us, he whispered. No, she said softly. We saved us. Medical teams rushed inside. Captain Rami was taken out on a stretcher, but survived after receiving quick treatment. Passengers insisted on meeting the little girl who had saved their lives. When Aisha stepped out of the cockpit, the entire cabin applauded. Mothers kissed her forehead. Fathers shook her hand. Children stared at her like she was a superhero they wanted to become. One old woman hugged her tightly. You were sent by God, she said. Aisha smiled shyly. I was just doing what I knew. News channels around the world exploded with headlines. 12-year-old girl saves 418, lives on flight 441. The miracle girl of the skies. A child who did the impossible. Her parents flew in the next day, tearful, shocked, unbelievably proud. Aisha, the quiet girl, who once loved only flight simulators, had now done something no simulator could ever prepare her for. She saved an entire plane with her courage, her knowledge, and her heart. Flight 441 would never be forgotten, and neither would the little girl who walked into the cockpit and changed destiny.